G'day photographers, it's Ben from TAFE, hope you're well, and this video is a recap of what we covered in class on the topic of retouching portraits. We covered lots of ground, and some were away and some were there, some came in late, so and regardless, this is the kind of stuff you're going to want to go over a couple of times anyway. I'm going to change that photo because Laura's looking really sternly at me. That's better. You're going to want to practice these things over and over again. Cool. All right. Before we get into retouching, there's a couple of things you can do to make less work for yourself in Photoshop. Obviously, we looked at things like getting a good night's sleep, drinking lots of water, all that kind of stuff. Lighting your subject well, so this is a natural light shot, and as we zoom in, we can see everything's looking pretty good. And you can even sort of light your subject in ways that make skin look even better, like we did with our photo shoot Tuesday afternoon. This sort of lighting where it was above the subject and really big and soft and flat really kind of flattened out the skin and made, you know, any retouching work we had to do pretty minimal. All right, let's jump into Photoshop. Let's start off with this photo of this handsome lad. I'm joking. Basically, I used a photo of me because sometimes retouching portraits can be a little bit of a touchy subject, I guess. If you're going to retouch someone's portrait, it's really important you discuss with them what they might feel comfortable with. Like, for example, that's not Nutella, that is actually a part of my face, it's always there, so technically it's a part of my character. So to quickly just go bloop and remove it might offend me. And yeah, it's not that. This is why I've given you all this photo to play with in class, because you can go nuts on it. I've got really thick skin and you can just practice on that without worrying about hurting anyone's feelings. Yeah, when you go and retouch your friends' portraits and things like that, just talk about what they might like to have done, if anything, and as long as the communication is really clear and it's there, you don't have any problems. All right, just to give you an idea of how far you can take this photo, there's Laura's work there, so I'm a pretty forgiving kind of guy, so don't be afraid to work on your photo here. All right, so two main tools we're going to look at when we work. And there's two main kind of workflows. I'm going to duplicate my layer just because, and this is the working with photo layers workflow. All right, so the two tools we're going to look at, this one here is the clone stamp tool. You guys wrote this one down in your notebooks, and the keyboard shortcut to it is the letter S on the keyboard. Now, when you click with the clone stamp tool the first time, you come up with a message that says, could not use the clone stamp tool because the area to clone has not been defined. Option click to define a source point. What that means is, when you hold down Option, or I think it's Alt on a PC, it changes the cursor to a target. So what I can, and then when I click, I'm basically saying use that area there. So I'll let go of my Option key. And you see as I move now, the cursor is now changed to a little piece of my skin, and then I can pop it over. Now you'll notice, see that little tail there? It's a little cross. That distance is always going to be the same from the source area, and just watch where that's following. If that source moves into an area that you don't want, say if I'm cloning up over here and I see how it picks up the glasses, you can sort of start to make some whoopsies, like that kind of thing. If you make mistakes, it's all good. This works like any other thing in Photoshop. You can just go back through your history, Control on a PC and Command on a Mac. Command Z always is good back through time. If you really screw up the layer, you can always bin it too. All good. Lots of different things. So that's the clone tool, and the clone tool was probably Photoshop's big first up. It was the first way you could actually sort of borrow bits of an image from somewhere and use them to cover up other bits. This tool here, the spot healing brush, does the same thing, except you don't need to define a source point. You just find the area you want, sort of match the brush size to it, and I'm doing this with my square brackets up above the return or enter key. So get them reasonably, and then click, and then you start to cover up things pretty quickly. There's two different flavors to this. There's content aware and there's proximity match, and both of them behave a bit differently. We did a little demonstration in class about that, but the general rule of thumb is if content aware isn't working so well, go back a few steps, try proximity match. And if you're in proximity match and it's not working too well, go back, try content aware. Sometimes it'll work better. If neither are working, it's probably the time you need to bust out the original and the king, the good old clone stamp tool, and use that. All right, so let's do a bit of retouching here. We've pulled away some spots. What else do we want to get rid of? Let's get rid of that little spot there. Let's zoom in here and let's get a bit close. Get rid of that spot. 2 minutes? All right, thanks. I'll be back. I will be with you. Let's grab these bits where I miss shaving or something. No, that's just weird. Get rid of them. Zoom out. Cool. We made some sort of big adjustments. Now remember, I can turn this layer off and see the before, turn it back on, see the after. That's cleared up everything quite nicely, but it hasn't sort of done a lot of skin smoothing. So I like to think of this first layer as the important bits or something. These are the bits you want to get rid of and you don't really want to see again. Then I like to make another layer, and you can do it as a photo layer, that's fine, and maybe call it skin work or something like that. You can call them whatever you want, and to name them, we're just double clicking on them. Cool. So this one, I'm going to just sort of get in there and get some work done. And generally, I'm doing this really quick because it's tutorial, but the smaller your brush is, the better. The more careful you are, the better. If you start doing really big areas like that, it starts to, transport eyebrows, but it does start to get a bit smooth, and the skin, before you know it, starts to lose its texture. Now that's probably, like, if we look at from where we've come to where we're going, the skin's kind of looking a bit smushy there, and it's kind of lost a lot of texture there. And if we were to keep going like this, I'd start to look like a smooth Ken doll without the chiseled chin. But what I like to do with this is when the skin's sort of, you've smoothed out your areas enough, really grab this opacity and then drop it back to either something really subtle, because that's sort of where I like my retouching, subtle. Just let it shine through a bit. So we've smoothed the skin, but we're still letting a little bit of that texture through. Cool. And And then, yeah, you can just sort of keep working and fiddling away on the texture of the skin and things like that. When you're done, file, save as, send your image out as normal. All right, the other workflow I mentioned is exactly the same as this, same process. So you've got your first layer is the bits you want gone forever. The second layer, so your third layer above your background layer, is the skin stuff, which you're going to mess with the opacity a bit later. Let's bin these. Oop, excuse me. Can't drive my computer. Here we go. Trash them. All right, but some people, instead of working on a photo layer, they just like to work on a plain old blank layer. Same process. Let's call this bits. The only thing you want to do here is when you start to work and you might start to make some changes and not see anything actually happen. That's because you have to sample all layers, which means the tool is now looking at below this blank layer. And as you see, once we start to work there, it's looking underneath, but it's putting the changes onto this layer here. Cool. Once you get all your bits gone that you don't want to see again, hit that extra layer, call it skin. You notice we're still working on sample all layers. That's when you can, and this brush is way too big, but I just want to show you. It's going to take Photoshop a minute to churn through that. See, it's just really manky. You want to work a lot more smaller than that, but with the opacity turned way down, you are getting a softening effect. Cool. All right, that's the gist of what we covered in class today. This is very, very basic introduction to retouching. There is a fair bit more to it than this, and we do tackle that in coming weeks and months. Yeah, we're going to look, if you're excited about that and you're enjoying this and you're grasping that really easily, I'll encourage you to go ahead and have a look at a technique called frequency separation. We're going to get in that later in the year. If you're really, really keen, you can come see me and we can talk about it now. All right, gang, good shooting, great work today. Talk to you soon.